Hello everyone, welcome to my Batman Arkham Asylum, hard difficulty, no damage walkthrough. This is the Arkham Mansion, and correction, we haven't reached the Arkham Mansion yet. We have to do a couple of things at the Batcave, then we need to go through the sewers area, get back above ground, and then we'll go to the Arkham Mansion. That's how that's going to be. And that right there, I lost the combo because I tried to do the long-range melee attack by pressing square, and nothing happened for some reason, even though that guy was in the rising animation. And that right there, I lost my combo because my combo Batarang clipped on the enemy that I knocked away, and there, I lost the combo because it didn't register my ground finish properly. I don't know why. Very ironic how these minor skirmishes before we get to the Batcave, you're going to be seeing moments where the combat definitely shows its holes. I mean, you'd expect such holes to be apparent in the bigger combat encounters, but somehow in my case, these holes made themselves known in these minor skirmishes. And I should actually clarify something. This is not actually, like, the first attempt at this walkthrough. Like, I replayed this game several times, and it was because in my previous attempts at recording Batman Arkham Asylum, I was not very satisfied with the way certain sections looked. And because this game doesn't have any sort of way to restart the individual chapters, I had to replay the entire game again. And relating to this greatly, I've actually been experimenting with this game when understanding how to upload save data from my PS5 to my USB drive. And I found some very strange results. So, Batman Arkham Asylum favors multiple save slots. I mean, there's 4 save slots that you can save to, but for some reason, when I take the save data from my PS5 and I copy it over to my USB drive, and then I take the save data from my USB drive, and then I upload it to my console, it only seems to affect the first save file. Like, I'm only able to manipulate the first save file. I can't do anything with the other save slots for some bizarre reason. It's very odd, and I've done so many things to try to manipulate all the save slots by using the save data from my USB, but my save data for the USB only affects the first save file, which is very strange. I think this might be the case with every other application that involves the PS5 or the PS4 when you're trying to use the USB to upload save data. And that right there, do you see that? That's yet again another great example of why the Cape Stun is so useless in this game. It doesn't have any range. How did I not cover that distance to get in? Like, why would they not think of that before considering that the Cape Stun mechanic was perfect? And then that right there, why did Batman prioritize the guy with the knife? That guy with the knife, the only way you can damage him is if you stun him first. But this game, I don't think it has the same kind of priority systems that Arkham City and Arkham Origins had, and they removed the priority systems in Arkham Knight for whatever reason. But I'm pretty sure in Batman Arkham City and in Batman Arkham Origins, when you were going up against enemies that you couldn't damage normally, and you had to either jump over them or you had to stun them with the cape, like, if you were just simply tapping square, Batman never prioritized those enemies. He never prioritized the armored enemies. He never prioritized the stun rod enemies. He never prioritized the guys with the shields unless they were off on their own, and you ended up moving the analog stick in their direction, which I still think is really dumb, that you can move the analog stick towards their direction, and Batman just goes for them when there are other enemies around. Like, I wish there was less control involved with the player when it comes to designating targets for Batman to hit. I mean, obviously in the cases of, I want Batman to prioritize this one guy with the ground finish, or I want him to attack this guy with square, but he prioritizes the wrong guy, that's different. But in the cases of armored enemies, like any kind of special enemy pretty much, like enemies that you can't simply damage normally with your normal strikes, Batman should never prioritize them when you're using square. He should only prioritize them when he's using his cape or when he's using his gadgets. That's the only time you should ever hit those guys, because the amount of times those special enemies are amidst a crowd of normal guys and Batman prioritizes the wrong guy and end up losing my combo. How many times has that happened to you? It's probably happened to a lot of people. Oh, and this is funny right here. So Batman literally acknowledges that he's been moving supplies into this Batcave onto Arkham Island for years, and we're just using the Batclaw to throw those supplies into the underground. Why? That just seems rather silly to me. I wish it was a different kind of obstacle for testing the Batclaw out. It really doesn't sit right with me. But as I was saying, I don't know why this game doesn't have a special kind of priority system where if you're using your normal strikes, Batman never prioritizes the knife guys. I mean, he'll probably only prioritize the knife guys, so the knife guys are the only guys left standing, but he should only prioritize them when you're using the cape stun, or when you're using anything that's not your normal strike, like your gadgets. Like, that would make the combat a lot more refined, and I feel like they had this kind of system in Batman Arkham City and Batman Arkham Origins, and I don't think this system exists in Batman Arkham Knight, because a number of times, special enemy types are amidst a crowd of normal guys, and Batman prioritizes the wrong guy. It happens so much in Batman Arkham Knight, and I'm noticing it a lot more in Batman Arkham Knight compared to Batman Arkham City and Batman Arkham Origins. And ironically, they do have the capabilities of putting in this kind of prioritization system for special enemy types, or for normal enemy types. Because in Arkham City, in Arkham Origins, if you did a takedown animation and there was an armored guy in the mix of all those enemies you were fighting, Batman would only ever prioritize the armored guys when doing the takedowns. Or he would prioritize other enemy types like shield guys or stun rod guys. So they're capable of putting in this kind of prioritization system, yet for some reason, this prioritization system doesn't seem to apply when you're using your normal strike animation against enemies. It's so odd. It's so, like, incongruous with the very nature of the mentalities put in place with this kind of prioritization system. It's rather bizarre. And that's why I just get a lot of these moments where Batman accidentally prioritizes the knife guys, and that's why I say it's important to get the combo batarang so that you bypass these kind of issues. And really, I don't understand why anyone would ever play the Arkham games without the upgrades. I mean, the whole point of the upgrade system in the Arkham games is to flesh out the gameplay. Like, there's so many ways of actually purchasing upgrades to contribute to new animations, to new kind of systems for getting sections done very quickly, so that you're not feeling fatigued by the encounters. And I swear to God, guys, I really notice in Batman Arkham Asylum how weak Batman is when he's striking enemies normally with his square attacks. Like, the amount of times I have to hit enemies, and this is even with critical strikes, like, the amount of times I have to hit enemies with the strike animation in order to take him out, it's so absurd to the point of making Batman feel very underpowered. And we know the strengths of Batman. I mean, we've seen Batman's strengths demonstrated so many times in the trailers. I mean, remember in Arkham City? Remember in the cinematic trailer for Arkham City when he's dealing with those tiger soldiers and he grabs a tiger soldier through a brick wall? That is some impressive strength right there, and admittedly it's probably the suit that's helping out, but he already has a pretty strong baseline with the amount he's trained outside of the country. But then you see in-game how much it takes to actually take out normal enemies with your normal strike attacks, and Batman feels so underpowered, and it doesn't help that some of Batman's animations can feel very slow at times. Like, you might have seen it in the first video of this walkthrough, but I put a little piece of text when I was doing the first combat encounter that says, "I hate that slow punch that Batman does." There's a punch animation that Batman does that I really despise, and the amount of times it really looks like Batman's going to get hit by an enemy, and I somehow managed to scrape by, and I get those moments where he's in the middle of that punch animation, and the enemies just get a cheap hit on him, because even when I do hit square first compared to the enemy, they still get the hit out first because Batman's animation is so slow. So frustrating, really frustrating. And this is why you need the upgrades to actually flesh out the gameplay, so that you're not noticing these kind of holes, and so you don't get fatigued by how much you have to punch these enemies. And this relates greatly to a point that somebody left in my first Knives Out video for Resident Evil Village, and I talked about this point at length in my second part of my Knives Out video series for Resident Evil Village that I haven't uploaded yet, because I'm just choosing to do this right now. Oh, and did you see that just then? Why did he miss his ground finish animation? That right there is dumb. And also, there are just moments where after you do an animation, if the game slightly detects Batman, like, walking, because you're trying to press square and move the left analog stick in a certain direction, if the game detects that Batman is moving, sometimes his combo is just lost. And then other times it doesn't happen. I don't really understand how that works, but it's really obnoxious that that is the case. But I changed my mind. I'm not going to mention that one stupid comment somebody left in the first part of my Knives Out video for Resident Evil Village on Village of Shadows difficulty, which is not really meant to be a run of any sort. It's meant to shit on new Capcom, and it's meant to shit on all people who do stupid runs, or just glamorize the whole idea of knife only, and, like, shit on all the gullible players that just try to follow new Capcom's desires with doing a really stupid challenge that the game isn't befitting for. Yeah, I'm not going to mention that. I mean, I probably will later on in this video if I change my mind again, but I doubt it. But we're once again engaging in some more minor combat encounters. And after we do this combat encounter, we're going to get introduced to a new enemy type, which is the Sniper Henchman. And I don't know what they've done with the Sniper Henchmen on this game, but the Sniper Henchmen are one of the most, like, random enemies ever. Because there are just times where they spot you for no reason. Like, they're just looking down at the ground, and then for some reason they just spot you out of nowhere, even when the laser sight isn't in your direction. It's so confusing. And then they have, like, dog ears, it feels like, because when I try to do these kind of fast animations, like using the Batarang to knock over enemies and then finishing off with a ground takedown, the sniper guys just spot me, and, like, they hear me somehow, even though they're across the world. I mean, look how far those guys are. But I had a moment where I used my Batarang to take this guy out, and those guys heard me from over there. That's just how binary the whole system of sound is when it comes to these kind of predator encounters. It seems like regardless of your distance, I mean, this is not including the Batarang, of course, but it really feels more binary with the Sniper Henchman on this game. But if you just make any kind of noise, regardless of distance, the sniper guys just hear you so easily, and it makes no sense. And then their ability to just spot you out of nowhere because their peripheral vision is god tier, or the laser is so dishonest with where they're actually looking, it's really annoying. But try to make sure that when you glide over to that cemetery area, the sniper guys aren't looking in your direction. And you'll want to sneak around the side, and if any of the sniper guys are looking in your direction towards the cemetery, wait for them to turn around, and then try to go to this ledge over here. And you can choose to handle this in a couple of ways. You can use the multi-batarang, you can take out one of the guys, the ledge takedown, and then take out the other guy. I'm not too sure why the second sniper didn't try to look in my direction when I did the ledge takedown, because the ledge takedowns do make noise. And, you know, I do get those moments where the snipers turn in my direction and they can't shoot me because I'm hanging off a ledge. But that time it didn't work. You see what I mean when I'm saying, like, the AI on this enemy is kind of sporadic in certain situations? That's what I mean. But we're now entering the Arkham Mansion, and this is where the combat encounters are going to get bigger. And this is really where the Predator encounters are starting to get a lot of fun, because the first Predator encounter that we do in this Arkham Mansion is the first time the Predator encounters start to add a little bit more flexibility into the mix with how they want you to approach the sequence. It's not so rigid and forced like the previous Predator encounters. It's actually offering flexibility, which I really like. And you're going to be seeing me use explosive gel in some very creative ways. But before that point, we have a couple of, or rather, we have one combat encounter, I should be saying. One big combat encounter that gives me a lot of trouble because so many enemies and the lack of options at your disposal with the combat on this game. There's so many opportunities for the combat to fail you. And I do have a blooper saved. I mean, it was only one blooper. I mean, but in my other recordings, I failed this fight right here so many times. But on this recording, I only failed it once. But you'll want to do a glide kick on this enemy, because when you launch him away, you'll be far enough away from the other enemies that you'll be able to finish him off with a ground takedown. That's the only form of advice I can give you for this combat encounter. And oh, did you see that just then? Did you see how Batman launched that guy into the sky when he did that back kick? That move is so powerful, but again, you're at the mercy of whatever Batman chooses to do, because he oftentimes doesn't choose to do the animation. But there are just times in this game where Batman can launch these enemies so high into the sky that it classes as an incapacitation, because when enemies fall from a great height, they're instantly down. And this is an important mechanic to realize, because when you knock off enemies when they're climbing ladders in the Predator encounters, or you use the Batclaw to pull enemies off of ledges, you can use the fall damage from that whole system to instantly incapacitate enemies, and it's a lot of fun to do. And on Batman Arkham Asylum, the Batclaw is so powerful in the Predator encounters, and then they nerfed the Batclaw in the rest of the games. I mean, what they did, they didn't take away the ability to pull enemies off of ledges. I mean, they did in Batman Arkham Knight for whatever reason, but in Batman Arkham City and in Batman Arkham Origins, not only is the animation of pulling enemies with the Batclaw a lot faster, because on Batman Arkham Asylum, the Batclaw has a bit of travel time before it actually grabs onto an enemy, which is a good design choice in Batman Arkham City and Arkham Origins, but you don't have the ability to pull multiple enemies because you don't get the Ultra Batclaw in Batman Arkham City and Batman Arkham Origins. But the enemies don't get pulled so much by the Batclaw in Arkham City and Arkham Origins. Like, you use the Bat Claw on Arkham Asylum, and the enemies get pulled quite a distance. Oh, and this right here, this is the first Predator encounter. This is where things get a lot of fun. So, take out that guy with your Batarang and the ground finish, and then place a bunch of explosive gel in these spots right over here, because I'm using this system to my advantage. Whenever Joker acknowledges that an enemy has been taken out, because the enemies in these Predator encounters, starting from now, have these suicide collars, which trigger whenever their heartbeat is low. A bunch of enemies will go off in the direction of the person you've taken out, and they'll omnisciently know where it is. And I mean, when they're first like running towards the body, not every single enemy will go for it, but when they call out the unconscious henchman, a lot more enemies will come to investigate as well. And this is a very important process because of how consistent this is, and it works every single time. I'm able to use explosive gel to my advantage as a trap, and the enemies do not recognize your explosive gel on this game. So by planting all that explosive gel right there, I'm laying a trap for the enemies that are scripted to go near the unconscious henchmen when Joker tells them to investigate, because he knows where they are, given that they're wearing the suicide collars. And I always place 3 explosive gel down on the ground. And there are some problems with the explosive gel, though. I mean, this is the one random element with the explosive gel. If the enemies get launched too high into the sky, or they end up falling off a ledge via the explosive gel, the other enemies will hear their screams as they're like falling, and they'll go and investigate as well. They'll run towards that area thinking you're there. And so it does limit your time to actually spend in that general area taking out the guys on the ground. And also, there's something else you need to bear in mind. If you get at least 3 henchmen investigating the body and use the explosive gel to knock them out, but the enemies typically go into a rising animation very quickly, and like by the time you knock out 2 guys on the ground, the other enemies will be in the middle of their rising animation. And the thing is that the enemies can actually spot you while they're in their rising animations, when they're trying to recover from the explosive gel or when they've been knocked out. And the thing is that when the enemies spot you, the other enemies that are not investigating the unconscious henchmen, they'll start to run towards you. Like, they'll know where you are. Like, they'll all like converge on you very quickly, because the enemy that you were trying to knock out went into a rising animation, and he saw you during the rising animation. And this is a problem in the Predator encounter when you return to intensive treatment, because a number of times I get 3 henchmen investigating the unconscious henchman, and I'm trying to knock out all 3 of them, and the 3rd guy goes into the rising animation, and he spots me during the rising animation, and the rest of the enemies converge on me, and it's so hard to go anywhere, because you want the enemies to come to you, but at the same time, if you glide onto one of those gargoyles, the gargoyles are booby-trapped, and so you try to glide away, and then it blows up, it distracts the enemies, and so you lose out on an opportunity to take out the enemies easily, and there's not a lot of options at your disposal of where to run when you're inside of the intensive treatment Predator encounter when you return to intensive treatment. Like that's what I mean. That's the one thing you gotta bear in mind when you're using the explosive gel trick for the Predator encounters. If you're trying to take out more than 3 enemies, or like at least 3 enemies. But other than that, the explosive gel trick is so powerful for the Predator encounters, and it works on every single Predator encounter. I mean, you don't have to do it, though. I mean, Batman Arkham Videos does those Predator encounters without ever having to use the explosive gel, which, I mean, I gotta give credit to the guy, but at the same time, you're not really showing, like, a lot of the fun you can have with the Predator encounters when you're using explosive gel to your advantage to just end these Predator encounters so quickly. I mean, it's incredible just how powerful Batman is in these Predator encounters, in every single game, really. And plus, I just take pleasure from actually discovering that trick by myself. Like, I've noticed this behavior so many times, but I never had the thought of using explosive gel like that until I discovered it a couple of months ago by myself. So yeah, I'm just committed to it when I discover something by myself. But we've now done that Predator encounter, we've done some minor skirmishes, and by the way, you do have to come down this path first. I know the game gives you like 2 paths to go on when you do that big combat encounter when you enter the main hall of the Arkham Mansion, but it almost seems counterintuitive because you have to find Dr. Young's fingerprints before it allows you to gain access to her notes in the library. So you just want to go down this path every single time. And then we're going to be moving on, and the rest of this is very simple. So I think during this time I'm going to go on different tangents. And I'm going to talk about something I didn't discuss in Arkham City, and I completely forgot to do so in the second video. But I mentioned how like it felt like in Arkham City you were kind of juggling between a lot of like main storylines for the main story quest. I just feel like there's a lack of focus displayed when being on a certain path in the main story. Like when you're tackling the main story in Batman Arkham City, the game kind of flip flops between three different storylines. You have the Doctor Strange storyline with Protocol 10. You have the League of Assassins storyline with Ra's al Ghul, and then you have Joker, who has his Titan disease, which I still question how he has lived so long compared to Batman, when Batman was dying after a couple of hours in Arkham City before he got the cure. But resuming my tangent, Serpent17 brought up this exact same detail as well with Arkham City. I mean, he mentioned that it feels like the main story in Arkham City is short, and there's not as much of a focus because it's kind of like going between three different storylines. And I've already discussed that with the three storylines between like Doctor Strange, Ra's al Ghul, and Joker. But I don't know how you guys feel about that. I just feel like because they were favoring the open world format, and I mean, Arkham Asylum does have an open world format, but the open world is so boring because you're just searching all the areas for Riddler challenges and Riddler trophies if you didn't do them during the main story, and then there's no incentive to really like partake in the open world after that. It's something I never like about these kind of games when, you know, like after you beat the entire game and you go back into the normal open world, it doesn't offer anything of crucial importance. And, you know, this was different in Arkham City, Arkham Origins, and Arkham Knight, but at the same time, the open world was very boring to go through once you beat the game. You know, like with Assassin's Creed, for instance, like Assassin's Creed Brotherhood and Revelations, I feel like there's still some enjoyment to get from the open world, even after you beat the main story and after you beat all the side missions. If you just want to fool around, or you just want to like do all these other things, or just like play around with the guards, you know, like, or just hear music. It's, you know, like I just feel like the open world has done a lot better in those games because I mean the core design of Assassin's Creed is open world, even if AC1 was more so a linear game, just using the open world as a backdrop. But with the Arkham games, I really feel like they would benefit from a more linear environment, just a linear story device, and none of the open world stuff. Because then, like, it would feel a lot more focused, and you know, like they would actually not embrace side missions, and maybe like they could put the villains into the main story in a way that didn't feel so like disconnected from the main story, like how it is with the open world format that they favor with the Arkham games. And I touched upon this point briefly in my second video of this walkthrough, but that's just rephrasing it again. And that's just how I feel about the open world in these games. I just find the open world to be rather boring, and really the only thing you'll ever go back to the games for after beating the main story is probably the challenges. And like the challenges are kind of fun, but I don't really find myself indulging in them that much because they're never as interesting as the combat and predator encounters that you do in the main game. And once you've like completed the challenges involved in actually getting your 3 medals in these combat and predator challenges, there's not a lot of incentive to go back to them unless you want to do like wacky videos like what you'd be seeing on YouTube right now, where people are doing all these crazy strats and just these speedrun strats for doing the predator encounters. I mean, not so much with the combat encounters, but not much to really do with the combat. Like, the combat just feels more suitable for like a story-driven device rather than just for challenges, I would say. At least in my opinion. I know this is going to be different among other people. That's just my subjective view on that. But I never find myself ever partaking in the challenges unless in Batman Arkham Knight they kind of reward you with experience or Wayne Tech points. I mean, it was the same case in Arkham Origins, but even then, I never found myself indulging in the challenges that much with Arkham Origins. I mean, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm not saying it's bad that the challenges are there, but, you know, like, you could easily implement those challenges in a linear environment rather than in a completely open world format like this game favors and the Arkham games in general. Like, I just feel like it would be a lot more focused. And when I think of Batman, I always think of a very linear experience. Like, it feels like with the atmosphere and darker tone of Batman, it feels like it's better told through a linear format rather than an open world format. And plus, you know, this is a general problem with all open world games. And Naughty Dog even poked fun at this when they were discussing the whole idea of why they didn't want The Last of Us Part 2, or rather Uncharted 4, I think, to be open world, because it almost leads to a sort of ludonarrative dissonance Like, there's an important event happening in the main game, like in the main story, where someone is going to die in like 5 minutes, and then you just go off and do a bunch of side quests, like 10 side quests or something, and it feels so weird. Like, when you do stag airships for the first time and Scarecrow escapes, he reveals to you that Oracle is in trouble. I mean, it's not really Oracle, though, because it's a hallucination of Oracle, because he's tricked you into believing that. But you don't even have to go and see Oracle immediately. You can just go off and do a bunch of side missions if you want to. And you feel like you have the urge to do that because, you know, you see something on the mission screen, or you happen to see something as you're trying to get over to Oracle, and you just feel obligated to do it. And it just feels so like incongruous with the very hasty nature you're supposed to feel because you know Oracle is being threatened. And not only that, but with the way like the side missions are mandatory to the main story. I mean, not on your first playthrough, of course. I mean, but on the rest of your playthroughs, you're not really going to be doing that so much. It feels very, very weird, you know. Like with Spider-Man, like with Marvel's Spider-Man, I feel like there is definitely some points in the main story of Spider-Man where you can actually go and do all these side activities and not feel like you've just been disconnected from the main story because you're doing them at such an inopportune time in the main story. And plus, like, the game even gives you the chance to go on these side missions. Like, it forces you to do some of the side missions in order to contribute to progress to the main story just for a little bit. And that's really it. But in Arkham Knight, I mean, they did this kind of, but it wasn't as like noticeable like in Spider-Man PS4. And I did mention to somebody who commented on the first video of this walkthrough that I would be doing Marvel Spider-Man on Ultimate difficulty when I get the chance. I mean, I'm going to be doing it with the upgrades, though, because doing Ultimate difficulty without the upgrades is such a bore. It's almost as boring as playing the Arkham games without any of the upgrades. And, like, I could do it on Spectacular difficulty, and it was kind of fun, but I totally understand the appeal for the upgrades, because, I mean, why would you ever want to compromise this kind of gameplay format by not getting the upgrades that flesh out the gameplay? Like, the upgrades are built into the nature of these kind of games with fleshing out the gameplay. I mean, I don't know what you describe this kind of genre where the upgrades contribute to, like, fleshing out the gameplay rather than just providing you all the upgrades immediately, or, like, rather than just going through the entire game without purchasing any upgrades, and, you don't feel like it impacts the overall gameplay. Like with Evil Within, for instance, like, let me just give you a great example of where upgrades are bad. Like, the Evil Within, upgrades just serve to make the gameplay too balanced. Or not really too balanced, just a little too overpowered for the player, if you ask me. And you mean, like, the game still works as intended when you are playing Akumu difficulty on the Evil Within without upgrades. Like, the bosses still die very fast with intelligent use of ammunition. There's so many other ways of getting resources for your trap parts, for instance. When you use that trick in the Keeper boss fight, like the very first Keeper boss fight of farming traps, in order to amass a lot of trap bolts for the Agony crossbow. I mean, you don't have to do that kind of trick with the Keeper. You can still get the game done with the resources you have, because I did it in my walkthrough. But I don't see why you would skip out on something like that, because Shinji Mikami is giving you this opportunity to do something very creative to save up on ammunition and actually get a lot of resources for the survival horror experience, and it's just a one-time thing only. But the main point here being, like, the Evil Within offers so many different ways of tackling the sections without having to be so reliant upon the upgrade system, and it doesn't feel like a pay-to-win design choice compared to Resident Evil Village. And I'm almost half tempted to do like a 13 reasons why video, or like some number of reasons why the Evil Within is so much better than Resident Evil Village. And the upgrade system is something I'll definitely critique whenever I decide to do that kind of video series. Like, similar to what Under the Mayo did when he was comparing Prey with Alien Isolation, or doing Prey and Cyberpunk. Like, there's so much to discuss about that, but the main point here being relating this to the Arkham games is, compared to the Evil Within, where the upgrades don't really flesh out the gameplay because the gameplay is already so fleshed out, and playing it with the upgrades, it feels like you're benefiting a noob playstyle. But in Batman Arkham, you need the upgrades to make the gameplay fleshed out so that you don't feel so fatigued, and it complements the whole idea of what Batman Arkham is from a gameplay format. It's meant to be this brawler-style game, and you're meant to be tackling the enemies and the side missions and the main story quests with a level of creativity And those upgrades provide a lot of creativity to tackle the sections. And, in case you're getting bummed with the combat, you have all these options of actually speeding up the combat encounters, and it's a lot of fun. And then you have options for the Predator encounters as well. And anyone who chooses to play the Arkham games without upgrades is seriously just a bore. Like, they want to compromise the overall gameplay experience, just deliver this kind of satisfaction, like this inner satisfaction almost on par with that of sexual desire, this and that, as if they feel, like, entitled to this, as if they want to make themselves high and mighty to all these other people that actually try to play the game with a level of creativity. And I talk about this point a lot in my Resident Evil Village, Knives Out, Village of Shadows shit video, like for Castle Dimitrescu, which I haven't uploaded yet. But I can't wait for you guys to see that video, because I was having a blast with Pikal when we were talking about this point. And relating to this, the guy who posted on that first part of the video series, who left that really shitty comment, that really dumb comment, that really rude comment, and he tried to put himself above me, yet he himself is saying in his comment that I'm putting myself above others when I'm calling these kind of people who do these kind of minimalist runs and just compromise the overall quality of the game shit. Like, as if I'm putting myself above them. But this guy hasn't watched my other videos. This guy has literally no idea what the fuck he's talking about. Why don't you actually watch my videos and actually understand who the fuck I am, rather than actually, like, going off on whatever mindless comments you have. I've actually watched your videos. I've actually seen the way people with this kind of dumb mindset just directly influence the minds of others, and they try to portray the game as if it's skillful. I mean, I've been friends with those kind of people before, and I used to adopt this kind of mindset before I realized how fucking feeble it is. Like, you have the right to just critique me like that? How dare you? I'm so glad that idiot is not on my channel anymore, because I blocked him from the channel, and my channel is not built for idiots. The audience members and people who actually comment on my videos, I allow them to participate because they don't try to make themselves look like fucking idiots with their retarded comments, because they don't leave retarded comments. And even if they do leave the most questionable comments ever, at least they approach it with a level of reserve, not trying to put themselves above me or anything. Like, they aren't phrasing the comments in a way that is meant to be asshole-ish. Like, Ether is very honest with his comments when he's talking about my commentary, or when he's talking about thoughts that probably conflict with my own. But he doesn't go out of his way to act like an asshole about it. But no, this guy who left that really bad comment on my first video, he said it in such a smug attitude. And I know he said it in a smug attitude because he left a smiley face emoji at the end of one of his sentences, like right near the end of his statement. And you seriously want to talk about me putting myself above others? Yet you're expressing the kind of attitude and lack of seriousness that is displayed by all these people that like to put themselves above others? Wow, you've already contradicted yourself with that first comment. Fucking idiot. I hope I never see that guy again. And this guy has left so many meme comments with that particular comment of his that I'm going to definitely cite them when I get the chances in the spur of the moment. Like when he used phrases such as smart tactics. Like, what? It is seriously the dumbest comment I have ever seen from anyone. It's honestly dumber than a lot of the things that Serum17 said to me, like in his Twitch live stream of Resident Evil 5, or with some of the other things he tried to insult me on. Like, I've never heard anything as ridiculous as that comment I read on the first part of my Resident Evil Village series. And I expected such comments because I know I'm going to attract a lot of these idiots out of the woodwork. And when they leave their dumb comments, it gives me something to talk about in the later videos. So, in the process of leaving whatever insulting comment they're leaving, you're giving me the opportunity to talk about those kind of comments in the later videos, and you're allowing yourselves to put yourself in the shit for leaving those kind of stupid comments. It was so funny, and there is so much more to say in that video series. But I've just done that second Scarecrow Nightmare sequence, which it's a little different because they now introduce skeleton enemies, which work exactly the same as the normal henchmen, but they have less life. So when you actually go into free-flow combat and you're doing all those very powerful attacks, regardless of whether it's a normal strike or a critical strike, it will always instantly down the enemy. And also, Explosive Gel instantly takes down those skeleton enemies. So you can do those sequences very quickly if you strategically place your Explosive Gel in certain spots. And then after that sequence, we got introduced to a new enemy type, which is the Stun Rod enemy, which I find it very funny because the way you deal with the stun rod enemy is you jump over them and then you attack them from behind. Because if you attack them from the front, you'll get shocked by the stun rod. And funny thing, when you use the bat claw on the stun rod enemy, if they end up stumbling into you, you'll take damage from the stun rod. I don't know why that's a thing. It's really stupid. It kind of disincentivizes you from using the bat claw further on that enemy. And also, I was going to get to this point, but you know, like the whole mechanic of jumping over them and attacking them from behind. Why doesn't that work with every single special enemy type? Like, you try to use this against the guys with the knives in the Batman Arkham Asylum game, and they'll just cancel whatever animation they're in to do their block animation, because that's unfortunately a consequence of the paired animation system. Whenever you're utilizing a paired animation system rather than a hitbox-based system, the enemies get all these really stupid properties that just allow them to cancel whatever they're doing to do this pre-programmed counter nonsense. Yet they're busy recovering from you jumping over them, or they're busy rising up off the ground. But if you even think about striking them without doing the rigid method of using the stun on them and then attacking them, they'll cancel whatever animation they're doing and just block your attack. How stupid is that? That is really dumb. And they had the right mentality with the stun rod guys, yet they never applied this mentality to the guys with the knives. How does that make any sense? That is very bizarre. But we just have one final minor skirmish right over here before we go inside the penitentiary. There's a stun rod guy right over there. Stun rod guys can also be damaged using your batarangs when you're using the combo batarang. And I could have... oh, right there. Do you see that? This is something you really need to get into the habit of doing, because one thing I really don't like about the Arkham games is if you don't have any combo, or if you're at X1 combo, you'll never go into free flow combat. You have to have X2 or higher to go enter free flow combat. So you drop your combo for whatever reason, and you're trying to do the attacks where Batman just glides towards the enemy due to the paired animation system, but because you haven't built up any combo, he's just striking at thin air. He only does like stationary melee attack animations. And this can be a problem if you're trying to stop an enemy from attacking you, or you're trying to use the strike animation to dodge attacks if the evade is not going to work. But you can't, because he's doing the stationary melee attacks, given that he doesn't have any combo, which is really dumb. Oh, and here's a blooper, by the way. So that right there, you see that was a slow strike that I was talking about in the first video. Because I entered that slow strike animation, I could not press the counter button at all, so that enemy was able to get a cheap hit on me, and I could not do anything. This is what I mean when I'm saying you should not tailor character animations to some random number generator. And even if they are tailored to a random number generator, they should be equally like speedy. Like, they should be the same speed and equally as reliable. They're just there for like cinematic purposes. They should not impact the gameplay like this. It's really dumb. And that's why I hate that punch so much. But the main point that I was going to address before I went off on this whole tangent on the free flow combat is, in this game and in the other Arkham games, you want to open up with countering an enemy, striking that enemy that you just countered, and then using the combo batarang. I think it's more useful in Batman Arkham Asylum, because at least you have the multi-batarang at your disposal integrated with the combo batarang. So you counter an enemy, you strike them, and then you immediately unleash 3 batarangs at once. That's a very helpful way to open up the combat and gain a bit of balance in the mix. But that is all I have to say right there, and that is the end of this video. Stay tuned for the future parts. Thank you all for watching, and you take care now.